I the asshole for refusing to turn my son's room into a nursery for my grandson? My daughter, Avery, 24, and her husband, Tom, 29, are expecting their first baby together. They are both very excited and have been getting so many things done in such a short time. Because they've been busy lately, we haven't seen them in 2 months. Yesterday, they visited me at the house to talk about the baby mostly. Tom asked me if I had emptied one of the rooms so I could turn it into a nursery yet. I was confused by this question and asked him why. He said that he expected me to. I again asked why. He looked at me and said that every decent grandmother prepares a nursery at her home specifically to welcome her grandson as a new member of the extended family. Then went on to give examples of how common this tradition is. I don't know why, but his words just irked me. I asked why can't his mom prepare one for her grandson since this is her grandson too? He laughed and said that his mom already had one prepared and she paid for it herself. I have to mention Tom's family is very well off, unlike us. We don't have an available room or money to afford an entire nursery yet. But Tom insisted that it's necessary and that I make efforts to make sure my grandson gets everything he needs whenever they visit. I looked at my daughter wondering if she agreed with this. By the looks of it, and she did. I told Tom that I don't have the space or money to make this happen, but he argued that not making this happen will affect how many visits I get compared to his mom, who is fully prepared and quote unquote considerate of her grandbaby's needs. Avery finally spoke up, but told me to please try to move my 16-year-old son to stay with his 14-year-old brother. I said no, the boys are old enough to get their own room. But Tom pitched in saying boys can share a room since they're boys. But I wasn't convinced. I was upset they came up with this suggestion. Avery didn't like that and took it as in I don't care about her baby and don't want anything for him, but that's just not true. The conversation turned into an argument and they left minutes later. Avery must have called my husband because he yelled at me when he came home saying this was no way to treat my daughter and our grandchild. I told him the story and he accused me of favoring the boys over Avery like I always do, but this time I just don't think her request is in any way reasonable. So, am I the asshole for refusing to turn my son's room into a nursery for my grandson? And the top comment coming in with 35,000 upvotes. What? They want your children who live there all of the time to be forced to share a room so that your grandchild, who will occasionally visit, can have its own nursery in your home? They have lost their minds. What a completely inappropriate thing to ask of your parents. It is totally normal for grandparents to keep some toys and possibly a pop-up crib in their home for occasional visits. This is not normal or acceptable behavior. My vote, not the asshole. Next comment, 10,000 upvotes. As a new parent myself, I don't get it. When my baby was new, we brought everything we needed over. Eventually, the grandparents started storing and buying things. I brought over a tin of formula and some bibs and dishes, and they each picked up some toys and books. My mother-in-law bought a pack and play, and my mom is storing mine that we don't really use. I'd honestly be super offended if anyone other than me had a full nursery. Like, how often do you expect me here? Next comment, 10,000 upvotes. So Avery has moved out, gotten married, is about to have a kid, and wants your 2 sons who are still living at home to not each have their own rooms as teenagers so that her baby, when she sometimes brings it for a visit, can use a room as a nursery. Meanwhile, the boys have to squeeze into one room 24/7 while the other is mostly empty. I'm having a hard time seeing you as the problem. My vote, you're not the asshole. Also, I've never heard of this quote unquote tradition. I do know plenty of parents who bring what they need when they travel, so this sounds like a luxury accommodation situation. Tom should get some perspective and be glad he has two families with grandparents who are alive and well. And my vote, this mom is not the asshole. Those kids don't need the nursery. Asshole for emasculating my husband and refusing to make my parents apologize for it. Me, 28 female, and my husband, 29 male, have been married for 5 years. Fuck. My husband was a nurse until he told me he wanted to become a doctor. I was fully supportive, and he is now in his first year of medical school. I have been supporting the both of us as he cannot work while in school, but recently found out our rent was being raised by $500 at the end of our contract in April. This was honestly the last straw as it pushed us past where we were financially comfortable. So I raised the idea of us buying a home. This had been a conversation for years, but my husband had always said we could after he had paid off his school debt from nursing, paid off early 2020. I asked my mother, real estate agent, who told me that with what we would be paying, it would be better for that money to go towards mortgage payments and not rent. I brought this all up to my husband, who shut it down almost immediately. He told me that our agreement was to wait until he had paid off all his debt. I told him that was for nursing and that he was in school for 6 years, which was hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of debt, and some doctors don't pay off their debt for over 20 years. I told him I had been supportive of his career change and by financially supporting the household, but that it was the best financial decision for us, but also relieved the financial burden for me. I brought up the savings we had for our deposit and how we could use that money to pay off his loans. I asked him if he realized the financial burden this would put on me, but he said he was temporarily and eventually he'd make more than me, so it would be even, and I had agreed to this. My mother called and asked if we were going to look into buying a house, but I told her we weren't and that we would be looking for somewhere cheaper to rent instead. She insisted we at least consider it because it made the most financial sense and asked if it was because we didn't have a down deposit. I told her that we were probably going to use that to pay off my husband's debt, and he didn't want more debt until he was debt-free from student loans. Days later, my mother and father came for lunch and told us they had news. They offered to gift us the down payment of a home. I was over the moon and shocked by the offer. Once they left, my husband exploded on me, claiming I am in front of my parents. I told him I never asked for this, but we should take it as it was a privilege most people don't get and would relieve so much financial burden on me. He refuses to talk to me or my parents until we apologize for shaming/emasculating him, but I refuse to. I apologized, but told him I wouldn't make my parents as they have done nothing wrong. So, am I the asshole here? And the top comment coming in with 25,000 upvotes. Not the asshole, just something to consider. If you help him pay off his student loans and financially support him for the next 10 years, say, then he divorces you. You are left with nothing, and him a debt-free life earning a doctor's salary. Next comment, 10,000 upvotes. That was exactly my thought, and that he's actually planning for it. Otherwise, why wouldn't he want to buy a shared asset like a home versus something that will only benefit himself? Next comment, 6,000 upvotes. Not the asshole. Your husband is straight up ridiculous, effing ridiculous. Is he otherwise a good partner? Is he thoughtful, kind? Does he respect you in every other area of your life besides this one? And I mean everywhere, because if he isn't, I would even wonder if it's worth being married to someone acting like this. The kind of emasculation he's describing doesn't actually exist. It's a byproduct of toxic masculinity, and it's effing nonsense. Next comment, 4,000 upvotes. Not the asshole. Your husband is an a-hole, though. You need to look carefully and dispassionately at this situation. He doesn't want to buy a house with you, a large financial commitment that binds you and him. He instead wants you to put the money you've earned and you've saved to pay off his student debt while you support him through school. You see the problem here? After school, he could leave you, not have a house tying you together, and have his student loan burden greatly reduced because of your money going towards it. Someone who wholly selfish and unwilling to consider the feelings and well-beings of a partner isn't in this for the long term. I hate to be so negative, but smart money is on him leaving you when he's graduated with a reduced student loan thanks to your hard work. Protect yourself, sis. And my vote, this person's not the asshole.
Let me know what you guys think.